Beloved and chosen one, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now and receive what is about to be spoken over your life, because this message did not find you by accident. And the fact that you are here, in this moment, with these exact words reaching your ears, is already the first sign that something has shifted in the atmosphere around you. There are things that only chosen ones experience, and if even one of these describes you, I need you to understand that what you have been carrying is not ordinary, and the path you have walked is not a mistake. The first sign is this: you have felt a specific kind of tiredness that sleep does not fix, a bone-deep weariness that comes not from laziness, but from years of fighting battles that no one around you could fully see. The second sign is that you have stood in rooms full of people and still felt completely alone, not because there was something wrong with you, but because your frequency was different, and you were never quite able to explain why the connections that seemed easy for others felt hollow to you. The third sign is that you have had moments, quiet and private moments, where you sensed something greater was coming, something that had your name on it, even when every visible circumstance in your life told you that you were falling behind. The fourth sign is that you have been misread, misrepresented, and overlooked by people who should have seen your value, and yet something deep inside you refused to. Let bitterness become your identity. The fifth sign is this: you are still here. After everything that tried to take you down, after every closed door, every delayed promise, every relationship that ended before it fulfilled what you hoped it would, you are still standing, still reaching, still willing to believe. That is not ordinary resilience. That is a divine mark. You were not built to simply survive. You were placed on this earth as someone who carries something rare, something that the world needs, and that heaven has been carefully preparing through every single thing you have endured. The waiting was not wasted. The silence was not abandonment. The stripping away of comfort and familiarity and easy applause was not punishment. It was consecration. And here is what I need you to hear more than anything else in this moment. You have not been almost ready. You were ready the moment you showed up here. Before I take you deeper into what this season truly means, I want to pause for just a moment and share something with you, because what I am about to say connects the spiritual reality you are already living to something that science has only recently begun to catch up with. Researchers who study the human brain have identified a specific frequency pattern called gamma brainwave activity that is measurably stronger in people who demonstrate what can only be described as unusual clarity, creativity, and spiritual receptiveness. And here is what is extraordinary. Chosen ones are born with stronger gamma activity than the general population. But long seasons of hardship, sustained stress, prolonged waiting, and chronic emotional pain have a measurable suppressive effect on that frequency. The very journey that was meant to prepare you has also, at the neurological level, been dimming a light that was always yours. A neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers, whose more than 30 years of research is affiliated with MIT, discovered a method he calls the genius wave, a 7-minute audio protocol that works with the brain's natural capacity for entrainment to restore and amplify those frequencies. 7 minutes. That is all it takes to begin the process of bringing that signal back online. If something stirs in you when I describe this, the link is already waiting for you in the pinned comment below. We will come back to this in greater detail very soon, but I did not want to take you through everything that is about to unfold without first giving you that anchor. Because here is what I want you to understand about this season you are stepping out of. The weight you have been carrying has not been meaningless. Every layer of difficulty that was placed on your life served a purpose that your mind could not have grasped while you were in the middle of it. There is a kind of preparation that can only happen in pressure. There is a kind of clarity that can only be born in confusion. There is a depth of compassion that only grows in someone who has known real pain, not theoretical pain, not the pain of inconvenience, but the kind of pain that makes you question everything you thought you understood about how life was supposed to work. You are what some would call an earth angel, not because your life has been easy or elevated, but because you carry within you a quality of light that was shaped precisely by the darkest places you were asked to walk through. The frustration you have felt, the longing you have carried, the sense that something enormous was always just out of reach. These were not signs of your failure. They were signs of your formation. And the shift that is happening in your life right now is not a small adjustment. It is not a minor uptick in your circumstances. It is a reordering of your entire trajectory. Heaven has paused the ordinary noise of your life to deliver this message directly to you, and what you are about to step into is something that your previous season, as painful as it was always pointing toward. There is a reason you did not give up. There is a reason every attempt to harden your heart failed. There is a reason you kept coming back to hope even when hope had cost you something. That reason is about to become clear to you in a way it never has been before. And as we move toward that clarity together, I want to give you 3 simple steps you can begin practicing right now, because this is not only a message to receive, it is a reality to inhabit. The first step is this: bring to mind one thing you are grateful for that did not happen. Not a blessing that came, but a disaster that was turned away. A relationship that ended before it could destroy you. A door that closed before you could walk through it into the wrong season. Sit with the gratitude of what was withheld, because what was kept from you was often protection wearing the face of disappointment. The second step is to speak this truth aloud, even quietly, even in a whisper. The time I thought I was losing was never lost. It was being woven into something I am only now beginning to see. The third step is to give yourself 7 minutes of stillness. Not meditation in any formal sense, not any technique that requires skill or training. Simply 7 minutes of quiet, where you let the noise of urgency settle, and you allow yourself to be present to this moment. 7 minutes of choosing to receive rather than strive. If something in this message has already reached a place in you that has been waiting to be touched, I want to invite you to do something for the chosen one who is going to find this video tomorrow or next week, still in the middle of the hardest part of their waiting. When you feel that stirring, that recognition, the quiet knowing that says, "This is for me," press like on this message so it travels further than it could on its own. Leave a word in the comments, even just one word, because when chosen ones speak into the space together, something shifts for everyone listening. Share this with one person in your life who has been carrying something heavy in silence, because this message may be exactly the word they have been needing and could not find on their own. And if you are not yet subscribed, let today be the day you choose to stay connected to this community, because the next message is already being prepared for you. There is also a donation link in the pinned comment below. And if you feel led to pass the light forward, that is one way of doing it for the next chosen one who arrives here with nothing left but the willingness to listen. And now, with those 7 minutes of practice as your foundation, let us go deeper into the full picture of what was briefly introduced. Because what is waiting for you in part 2 is going to change the way you understand everything that brought you here. What if the very thing that has been making you feel behind is the same thing that proves you were built for more? Not as a comfort, not as a reframe designed to make the waiting feel prettier than it is. As a scientific fact that a researcher spent over 30 years documenting. Earlier in this message, I briefly mentioned something. Now I want to give you the full picture. There is a frequency that chosen ones carry. It is not metaphorical. It is not spiritual language dressed up to sound scientific. It is measurable, it is real, and it has been documented in laboratory settings by researchers who did not set out to prove anything about divine calling or spiritual identity. They were simply following the data, and the data led them somewhere extraordinary. The human brain operates across a range of electrical frequencies at all times. You have likely heard of some of them. Alpha waves are associated with relaxed alertness. Beta waves are what most people operate in during ordinary waking life, task-focused, socially engaged, running through the list of things that need to get done. Delta waves govern deep sleep, and then there are two frequencies that sit at the edges of what most people ever access, and these are the ones that matter most to the story I am about to tell you. The first is theta. Theta waves operate between 4 and 8 cycles per second, and they are the frequency of deep creativity, intuitive knowing, accelerated learning, and the kind of quiet receptivity that most adults have almost entirely lost access to. Children live in theta. It is why they learn language at a speed that no adult can replicate, why their imagination is boundless, why they ask questions that cut straight through to the heart of things without being trained to do so. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, most people drift out of theta and never find their way back. The demands of survival, the weight of disappointment, the accumulated pressure of years spent trying to prove your worth and secure belonging, all of it gradually pushes the brain into the shallower, faster frequencies of daily management. And something essential goes quiet. The second frequency is gamma. Gamma waves are the fastest of the major brainwave categories, and what researchers have found in them is something that genuinely stops people in their tracks when they hear it for the first time. Gamma activity is associated with what neuroscientists describe as peak cognitive integration, the state in which different regions of the brain are firing in coordinated, synchronized patterns. It is the frequency of insight, of breakthrough, of what people commonly call the eureka moment, that sudden arrival of clarity that cannot be forced or manufactured, only received. Studies of advanced meditators, of individuals identified as exceptionally creative or spiritually attuned, and of people who demonstrate what researchers call unusual perceptual sensitivity, consistently show elevated gamma activity. This is not a fringe finding. This is documented, reproducible, and peer-reviewed. And here is the part that I need you to sit with for a moment. The research suggests that people who carry what might be described as a heightened sensitivity to meaning, to pattern, to spiritual signal, those who have always felt the weight of something larger than themselves pressing against their daily life, demonstrate gamma signatures that are measurably different from the general population. Not better in every practical sense, not easier to live with, but different in a way that speaks directly to what they were built for. The problem is this: gamma is fragile in the way that all rare things are fragile. It is suppressed by chronic stress. It is dimmed by prolonged seasons of uncertainty and unresolved grief. It is quieted by the specific kind of emotional exhaustion that comes not from physical overwork, but from years of carrying a vision that the people around you could not see, of waiting for a confirmation that was always just slightly out of reach, of holding hope in one hand and evidence of delay in the other. and trying to keep walking forward anyway. In other words, the very journey that was designed to prepare you for what you were called to do has also been working against the neurological frequency that makes you most capable of receiving and executing that calling. This is the discovery that Dr. James Rivers dedicated more than 30 years of his life to understanding. Dr. Rivers is a neuroscientist whose research career spans affiliations with MIT and work connected to the broader scientific community studying human cognitive potential, including research contexts linked to NASA's interest in understanding peak human performance. What he found after decades of study was not simply that these frequencies exist, but that the brain has a natural and trainable capacity to return to them. The brain does not permanently lose access to theta and gamma. It is suppressed, and what is suppressed can be restored. The mechanism Dr. Rivers built his method around is called brainwave entrainment. The principle is straightforward, even if the science behind it is sophisticated. The brain has a documented tendency to synchronize its own electrical activity with rhythmic external stimuli. This is not a new discovery. It has been studied for decades. What Dr. Rivers contributed was the precise calibration of audio frequencies designed to guide the brain gently but reliably into theta and gamma states, using a combination of binaural beats and carefully calculated tonal patterns that work through standard headphones. The result is what he named the genius wave, and the protocol is 7 minutes. 7 minutes, which is the same amount of time I asked you to sit in stillness just before this section began. That was not accidental. That was a small, quiet rehearsal for something larger. Your brain has already begun to soften its grip on the frequencies of urgency and survival. What Dr. Rivers built is the tool that takes that softening and turns it into something precise, repeatable, and lasting. You do not need to learn meditation. You do not need a background in neuroscience or any kind of technical knowledge. You do not need to already be spiritual or disciplined or in a particular emotional state. You simply need 7 minutes and a willingness to let the audio do what it was designed to do. The brain follows. That is what entrainment means. The external signal leads, and the brain by its own nature follows. I want to tell you about someone who found the genius wave in circumstances that were not entirely different from what many of you have described in your own lives. She had spent the better part of 2 years in what she called a fog, not depression in the clinical sense, but a pervasive flatness, a feeling that the clarity she used to trust in herself had gone somewhere she could not reach. She was functioning, taking care of her responsibilities, showing up to her life, but she told me that it felt like watching herself from the other side of glass. She started using the genius wave consistently, 7 minutes each morning before anything else, and what she described at the end of the first week was not dramatic. It was quiet. She'd said the glass was gone. She said she felt like she had moved back into herself. By the end of the month, she had made a decision she had been circling for over a year, and she described the making of that decision as the easiest thing she had done in recent memory. Not because the stakes were lower, because the clarity was back. I know that some of you are sitting with a very practical thought right now. $39 is not nothing. And I want to acknowledge that directly, because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve a sales pitch. You are right that it is not nothing. And I also want you to consider what you have already invested in time, in energy, in the quiet cost of living, below the clarity that was always yours, in the weight of carrying a calling that you could feel, but could not quite access. $39 for the tool that begins to restore that access is not an extravagance. It is, by almost any measure, one of the most practical investments you could make in the season you are stepping into. The standard price is $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below, you can access it today for $39, and it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee. 90 days. That is 3 full months to use the Genius Wave consistently, to observe what shifts in your clarity, your creativity, your sense of direction, and your capacity to receive what has been prepared for you. And if at the end of those 90 days you feel it has not been worth it, you receive a full refund with no questions and no conditions. One thing I need to say clearly: there are imitation products circulating that use similar language and make similar claims. Please do not purchase from any source other than the single link in the pinned comment below. That is the only verified, authentic source for the Genius Wave, and it is the only one covered by Dr. Rivers' guarantee. This offer, at this price, is not permanent. The access to $39 through this channel is available for a limited time and in limited quantities. If you have felt something shift in you while listening to this section, if something in your body recognized the truth of what was described before your mind had time to process it, I want to encourage you not to wait. The link is in the pinned comment. It will take you less than 2 minutes to secure your access, and then we will continue this journey together, because what is waiting for you in the parts ahead is the deeper story of why you were chosen for exactly this moment, and what it means that the season you have been living through is not a detour, but the precise path that led you here. There is something I want to name for you right now, something that most people in your life have not had the language to say, and something that you may have spent years trying to articulate to yourself in the quiet moments when the noise of daily life finally settled enough for you to hear your own thoughts. What you have been living through has a shape. It is not random. It is not the result of bad luck or poor choices or some invisible flaw in your character that has been working against you without your knowledge. What you have been living through is a specific kind of season, and it carries with it a specific set of signs that are so precise, so consistent across the lives of chosen ones, that when I name them, I want you to notice not just the recognition in your mind, but the recognition in your body, the slight loosening in the chest, the quiet exhale, the feeling of finally being seen by someone who did not need you to explain yourself first. The first sign is a wave of sadness that arrives without a clear trigger. You could be in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, doing something completely unremarkable, and it comes a heaviness that feels less like grief about something specific and more like a mourning for time, for the version of your life that has not yet arrived, for the relationships that were supposed to be further along by now, for the dreams that are still waiting in the space between what is and what was promised. This sadness is not depression, though it can feel like it from the inside. It is the soul registering the weight of a long season with honesty. It is the acknowledgement of real cost, and it is, strangely, a sign of spiritual sensitivity rather than spiritual weakness, because only someone who carries a deep awareness of what they were made for can feel the ache of not yet living fully inside it. The second sign is that familiar places and people have begun to feel heavy in a way you cannot fully explain. A friendship that used to feel easy now requires something from you that you are not sure you have left to give. A routine that once felt comfortable now feels like a coat that no longer fits, not because the routine has changed, but because you have. Places you have been going for years suddenly carry a strangeness, a sense that you have outgrown the container without yet knowing what the next container looks like. This dissonance is not ingratitude. It is not restlessness for its own sake. It is the evidence of interior growth that has not yet found its exterior expression. You have been changing at a level deeper than your circumstances have been able to reflect, and the heaviness you feel in those old familiar spaces is simply the friction of someone who has grown too large for the room they have been living in. The third sign is a recurring dream, or a recurring feeling that functions like a dream about a door that has not yet been opened. Some of you have literally dreamed of a door, a specific door in a specific place, and you have stood before it night after night without the handle turning. Others of you have not had the literal dream, but have lived with a persistent inner image of something just on the other side of a threshold you have not yet crossed, something you can almost see, almost touch, almost name, but that remains just beyond the reach of your current circumstances. That door is not locked against you. It was never locked against you. It was simply waiting for you to arrive at a specific kind of readiness that could not be manufactured from the outside. The fourth sign is that the same message keeps finding you through different voices, different sources, different channels. A word spoken in a conversation you were not even fully present for. A sentence in a book you picked up without particular intention. A lyric in a song playing in the background of someone else's moment that landed directly in the center of yours. A video that found you, perhaps, exactly like this one found you today. When the same message comes to you through multiple unconnected sources, that is not coincidence. That is confirmation. Heaven does not repeat itself for its own entertainment. When the same word reaches you again and again through different mouths, it is because that word belongs to you, and the source that sent it will keep finding new vessels until you receive it fully. Now I want to speak to the specific texture of the pain that has accompanied this season, because I think you deserve more than a general acknowledgement that things have been hard. I want to name it precisely. There have been nights where sleep would not come, not because your mind was racing with productive thought, but because something unresolved was sitting in your chest, and your body could not fully surrender to rest while carrying it. There has been a loneliness that is distinct from simply being alone, a loneliness that can exist in the middle of a crowd, in the middle of a conversation, in the middle of a relationship, the loneliness of someone who has not yet met the people who were made for the season they are entering. There has been the specific ache of feeling wronged and having no clean resolution available, of knowing that something unjust happened, that something was taken from you or denied to you in a way that was not fair, and having to carry that without the vindication that your soul was waiting for. And there has been the pain of being misunderstood, of having your intentions read incorrectly, your character assessed by people who were only seeing a fraction of who you were, your silence mistaken for weakness, your patience mistaken for resignation. I see you in all of that, and I want to offer you a reframe that I need you to hold carefully, because it is true and it matters, but I do not want to give it to you too quickly. The waiting you have been in is not a waiting room. It is not a holding area where God or the universe, or the intelligence that governs all things, has set you aside while attending to more important matters elsewhere. The waiting you have been in is a positioning, and there is a difference between those two things that changes everything. To be overlooked is to be present and unseen, to be passed by because someone with the power to recognize you chose not to. To be positioned is to be deliberately placed exactly where you are needed to be, at exactly the angle required, at exactly the depth of preparation necessary for what is about to happen next. Overlooked is accidental. Positioned is intentional. Overlooked means someone missed you. Positioned means no one missed anything. Every detail of where you are and what you have been through was seen, registered, and used in the construction of something you are only now beginning to be able to receive. You were not overlooked. You were positioned, and the person who cannot yet see what those years of preparation were building is not God, it is you. But that is about to change. What you have been carrying, the grief, the confusion, the longing, the recurring sense that something enormous was always just out of reach, has not been a sign of abandonment. It has been the sensation of preparation from the inside. It is what it feels like to be made ready for something that your current self is not yet equipped to hold. And the very fact that you have not let go, that you have not walked away from the hope that something real was coming, that you have kept showing up even when showing up cost you something, is the evidence that the preparation is working. You are not behind. You are almost there. And almost there, for a chosen one who has walked the road you have walked, is closer than it has ever been before. Right now, all across this world, there are chosen ones arriving at exactly this recognition, at exactly this moment. You are not an isolated case. You are part of a wave of people waking up to the truth of what they carry and what they were made for, all at the same time. If this message has reached something in you that has not been reached in a long time, I want to gently invite you to press like so it finds the next person who needs to be named and seen the way you just were. Leave a word in the comments, just a mark that says you were here, that you showed up for yourself today. Because every word left in this space becomes part of something that the next chosen one who arrives here will feel before they even begin reading. Share this with one person who has been searching for stillness in a season that has felt anything but still. Because this naming is a gift, and gifts were made to be passed. And if you feel led, there is something in the pinned comment that allows you to pass a blessing forward for the next person who arrives here with nothing left but the willingness to receive. Choose to remain part of this community of chosen ones who are waking up together, because what is coming in the next part of this message is something that will ask you to go even deeper, to sit with the full weight of what this season has cost you before we talk about what it has built. And with that, I want you to type the word ready in the comments if what I just described is the shape of the season you have been living in. Because you being here, saying that word, is the beginning of something you have been waiting a long time to step into. There is something I need to do now that most messages like this one are too afraid to do, and I need you to trust me enough to stay with it. Because what comes next is not comfortable, but it is honest, and you have earned honesty far more than you have earned comfort. We have talked about positioning. We have talked about the divine architecture of the season you have been in. We have talked about the frequency you carry and the preparation that has been happening beneath the surface of your circumstances. And all of that is true, every word of it. But before we move into what is coming, I need to sit with you in what it cost. Not to dwell in pain for its own sake, not to open wounds without purpose, but because there is a kind of honoring that needs to happen before healing can be complete. And the honoring requires that we name the loss without immediately softening it. So let us do that now. Let us sit here together without rushing toward the resolution and acknowledge what these years have actually taken from you. There are relationships that could have been built during the time you were in this season that were not built. Friendships that might have deepened if you had not been so consumed with surviving. A marriage that might have grown in ways it did not, because the weight you were carrying left so little room for the kind of presence that relationships require to flourish. Children who needed a version of you that you were doing your absolute best to offer. while simultaneously holding together an interior world that was fracturing under pressure they could not see, and you could not fully explain. People who came to the edge of your life during this season and could not find a way in, not because you did not want them there, but because the door was partly closed by exhaustion, by guardedness earned through repeated disappointment, by the very reasonable protective instinct of someone who had already been hurt by trusting too openly. You grieve those connections, and the grief is real, and I am not going to tell you it is not. There is a career, or a creative path, or a calling in its practical expression that could have gone further by now. You have watched people move past you, not because they were more gifted, not because their vision was clearer or their work was stronger, but because the season you were in demanded so much of your internal resources that the external building slowed, or stopped entirely, or had to be rebuilt from the ground up more than once. You have had to restart things that should have already been finished. You have had to reprove things that should have already been established. You have had to explain your delay to people who did not have the context to understand it. And sometimes you could see in their eyes that the explanation was not landing the way the truth of your story deserved. You grieve that time, that momentum, those years, and the grief is real, and I am not going to minimize it. There is also the freedom you lost, the freedom to talk openly about your dreams without bracing for the look on someone's face that told you they were not sure they believed you anymore. There came a point in this season where you stopped sharing certain things with certain people, not because the dreams died, but because protecting them from the response of those who could not see them became necessary for your own survival. You learned to carry the largest parts of yourself in silence. You learned which rooms were safe and which were not. You learned to read the energy of a conversation quickly enough to know when to hold back. And you became so practiced at that self-editing that there are moments you are no longer entirely sure where the protective silence ends and the real you begins. You grieve that freedom, the ease of being fully known, the lightness of not having to manage how much of yourself was visible at any given moment. And the grief is real, and it belongs to you, and it does not need to be explained away. And then there is the one that perhaps cuts deepest of all, the faith in yourself that this season has tested. There have been moments, and I believe you know exactly which moments I mean, where the voice of doubt was not coming from outside you, but from within, where you looked at the gap between where you were and where you believed you were supposed to be, and the question that rose was not, why is this taking so long? But what if I was wrong about myself? What if the sense of calling was something I constructed to make the difficulty feel meaningful? What if I am not who I thought I was? What if the people who did not see my value were seeing something I was refusing to see? That doubt is one of the most painful things a chosen one can experience. Not because it is evidence of weakness, but because it comes with such a specific texture of loneliness. You cannot share it easily, because sharing it risks it being confirmed by someone who does not have the full picture. So you carry it quietly, and it sits with you in the hours when everything else has gone still. I want you to sit with all of that now, not to rush past it, not to immediately receive the comfort that is coming, just to let the full weight of what this season has cost be acknowledged by at least one voice, even if that voice is reaching you through a screen rather than across a table. Now I want to bring you to a king. His name was Hezekiah, and his story is found in the book of 2 Kings, beginning at chapter 18. And I want to bring you to him not at his moment of triumph, not at the moment of divine reversal that his story eventually reaches, but at the moment before it. because that is where you have been living, and that is the moment that deserves our attention right now. Hezekiah was a king who had done everything right by the standards of his faith and his calling. He had torn down the altars to false gods. He had led his people with integrity. He had chosen again and again the harder path of faithfulness over the easier path of political expediency. And then the armies of Assyria came. Under the command of Sennacherib, the greatest military power of his world surrounded the city of Jerusalem and sent a message directly to its people, designed to do one thing: to make them believe that their God could not save them. The message was specific and it was brutal. It named every nation that Assyria had already destroyed. It asked, with the cold logic of military supremacy, what made Hezekiah think that the outcome here would be any different. And Hezekiah received that letter. He read every word of it. He felt the full weight of what it represented, not just a military threat, but an assault on the very foundation of everything he had staked his life on. And the text tells us that he went into the house of God, and he spread the letter out before the Lord. He did not minimize what was written in it. He did not perform confidence he did not feel. He brought the full unedited reality of the threat into the presence of God, and he wept. That is the moment I want to leave you in for now. Not the resolution, not the angel who came in the night, not the morning when Hezekiah's enemies were found defeated without a single sword having been raised by human hands. Just this, a chosen one, a man who had done everything right, sitting in the weight of a threat so large that no human strategy could have answered it, and choosing, in the middle of that darkness, not to pretend it was smaller than it was. That is where you have been. And the fact that you are still in that room, still bringing the letter to God, rather than walking away, still willing to spread out the full contents of what you have been carrying and say, I cannot solve this on my own, is not weakness. It is the posture that precedes the miracle. There is a moment that comes after the heaviest kind of honoring, after you have sat with the full weight of what was lost and named it without flinching, where something in the interior landscape begins to shift. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, but with the quiet, almost imperceptible quality of light changing at the very edge of early morning, before the sun has fully risen, when the darkness is still present but something in the air carries the unmistakable signal that it will not be dark for much longer. That is where you are right now. And I want to give you something ancient to stand on in this moment, because I have found that when the modern language of encouragement runs thin, when the familiar reassurances have been offered so many times that they no longer carry the weight they once did, there is something that happens when you reach back into the older languages, the deeper wells, and draw from the understanding of time that our ancestors carried long before the world began measuring life in quarterly targets and 5-year plans. The first concept I want to offer you comes from the Hebrew Scriptures, and it centers on a word that does not translate cleanly into English, which is part of why its meaning has been largely lost in the modern conversation about waiting and timing and divine purpose. The word is mode. And while it is often translated simply appointed time, that translation flattens something that the original language was doing with far more precision. Mode does not simply mean a time that was scheduled. It carries within it the sense of a meeting that was agreed upon before either party fully understood what the meeting was for. It is the word used in contexts where God sets a time and a place for something to occur, not as an arbitrary marker on a calendar, but as the precise convergence of preparation and promise. It is the moment when everything that was separately being made ready arrives at the same point simultaneously. And what seemed like a collection of unrelated threads suddenly reveals itself as a single coherent design. Think about what that means for the season you have just come through. Every delay that felt like abandonment. Every door that closed before you could walk through it. Every relationship that ended. Every plan that collapsed. Every version of the future you had constructed that had to be dismantled and rebuilt. In the framework of mode, none of those things were interruptions to the appointed time. They were the appointed time and processes. They were the separate threads being drawn toward the convergence point that was always coming, that could not have arrived any earlier because the preparation it required was not yet complete. What God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. That is not a sentiment. That is a structural truth embedded in the ancient understanding of how divine timing works. The appointed time is not vulnerable to the interference of human failure or enemy, opposition, or the accumulated weight of difficult years. It holds, it has always held, and it is holding right now for you in this moment. Even as you sit with the residue of everything that tried to convince you otherwise. I want you to let that land in the place where the doubt has been living. The place that asked, in the quietest hours, whether the promise had an expiration date that you had somehow missed. It did not. Moed does not expire. It arrives, and the arrival, when it comes, does not announce itself with apology for the time it took. It arrives with the full authority of something that was always going to happen, and it asks only one thing of you, that you be present enough to receive it. The second concept I want to bring you into is one that may be the most important thing I say to you in this entire message. It is what the ancient wisdom traditions called the hour of revelation, and I want to be careful about how I introduce it, because it sounds like it should be a moment of external event, a visible shift in circumstances, a dramatic change in what can be seen and measured and pointed to. But that is not what the hour of revelation is, not primarily. The hour of revelation is the moment when the chosen finally understands the name of what they carried. It is the moment when the suffering stops being a collection of painful and disconnected experience. It becomes a sentence, a coherent sentence with a beginning and a middle and a purpose that the ending is now equipped to fulfill. It is the moment when you look back at the road you walked and you see, perhaps for the first time with full clarity, that you were never wandering. You were being directed. Not always gently, not always in ways that felt like guidance while you were inside them, but directed nonetheless, with a precision that only becomes visible from the far side of the season. And here is what I want you to understand about the hour of revelation as it applies to your specific story. It does not always arrive as a single moment. Sometimes it arrives as a series of small recognitions, each one adding another word to the sentence until the full meaning is finally legible. You may have already received the first word, the recognition you experienced in part 3, when you heard the 4 signs described and felt your own story reflected back to you. That was a word in the sentence. The honoring you did in part 4, sitting with the full cost of the season without rushing past it, that was another word. And what is happening in you right now, this quiet shift in how you are holding your own history, this is another word still. The sentence is being completed. The hour of revelation is not coming. It is here. It is happening in real time as you receive this message. And what it is revealing is this: the pain that felt most arbitrary, most senseless, most resistant to meaning, was the pain that was doing the deepest work. The rejection that seemed most cruel was the one that redirected you most precisely. The loss that cost the most was the one that created the most essential space for what is coming to occupy. Then came the hour of revelation. and the final pain was given its name, the calling. That is the sentence I want to leave in you. The final pain has a name, and the name is not failure. The name is not punishment. The name is not evidence of being forgotten or overlooked or assigned a lesser portion than you deserved. The name is calling. Your calling wore the shape of your suffering because it had to be built from the inside out, and the inside had to be remade before the outside could reflect it. You are not the same person who entered this season. You could not go back to being that person even if you tried, not because that person was insufficient, but because you have become someone who contains more depth, more capacity for compassion, more ability to hold complexity without being destroyed by it, more sensitivity to the signal beneath the noise of ordinary life, more willingness to trust a process that cannot always be explained in the language of visible progress. And that person, the one you have become through the fire of this season, is exactly the person who is equipped to walk through the door that is now opening. I want to gently remind you of something before we move forward. Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years documenting what happens when the brain is restored to the frequencies of gamma and theta, the frequencies of insight, of creative breakthrough, of receptivity to exactly the kind of revelation I have been describing. The hour of revelation is not only a spiritual event, it is also a neurological one, and the genius wave is the tool that prepares the neurological ground for exactly this kind of clarity to take root and grow. If you have not yet visited the link in the pinned comment, I want to simply remind you that it is there, quietly waiting, without pressure and without urgency, for the moment when you are ready to give 7 minutes to the restoration of the frequency that was always yours. Because what is coming in the next part of this message is going to ask you to look forward. And looking forward with clarity requires that the instrument of perception, the brain that has been carrying the weight of this long season, be as clear and as open and as fully alive as it was always meant to be. The appointed time is here. The hour of revelation is now. And you, chosen one, are more ready than you have ever been to receive what has always been coming for you. Something has been set in motion, not by this message, though I pray this message has been a marker along the way, not by a single decision or a single moment of recognition, though those matter more than you may yet understand. What has been set in motion is something that was already moving beneath the surface of your life long before you arrived here today. And what I want to do now is bring it into the light where you can see it, name it, and begin to move toward it with the kind of intentional expectation that a chosen one in your position is fully authorized to carry. There are 3 things that are already shifting in your life right now. Not things that will shift if you do everything right. Not things that might shift if circumstances align favorably. 3 things that are already in motion, that the season you have just come through was specifically designed to make room for, and that are moving toward you with the same kind of quiet, unstoppable certainty that the dawn moves toward the horizon. It does not ask permission. It does not negotiate with the darkness. It simply arrives, because that is what it was always going to do. The first thing that is shifting is your sense of direction. There has been a specific kind of confusion that has characterized parts of this season. A fog around the question of what you are supposed to be doing and whether you are doing it in the right way and at the right time and with the right people. That fog is lifting, not because the external circumstances have all resolved themselves into clarity, but because something internal has shifted in the way you are relating to your own knowing. You have spent years second-guessing the signal that comes from the deepest part of you, the quiet inner voice that has never actually steered you wrong, even when following it cost you something. And you have second-guessed it because the gap between what it pointed toward and what was visible in your circumstances was wide, enough to make you wonder whether you were simply hearing what you wanted to hear rather than what was actually true. That gap is closing. The direction you have been sensing, the one you have held privately and sometimes silently, because sharing it required more confidence than the season allowed you to access, is about to become undeniable. Not just to you, to the people around you who have not been able to see it. The clarity that is coming is not the fragile kind that requires constant external validation to remain intact. It is the settled kind, the kind that comes from having been tested long enough to know that it does not bend under pressure because it has already survived every pressure this season threw at it, and it is still standing. What is shifting is not just what you know. It is the confidence with which you know it. The second thing that is shifting is the quality of your connections. There are people in your life right now who belong to the season you are. Leaving, not because they are bad people, not because the time you shared with them was without value, but because the frequency you are moving into is one they are not equipped to accompany you into. And some of those departures have already begun, quietly and sometimes painfully, with the slow drift that happens when two people are simply no longer growing in the same direction. I want you to release those transitions without guilt. Not every relationship was designed to be permanent. Some were designed to be exactly what they were for exactly as long as they were, and the honoring of what they gave you does not require you to hold on past the season they were assigned to. But here is what I also want you to hear. There are people who are moving toward you right now who carry something you have been longing for without always being able to name it. People who will understand the language you have been speaking into silence for years. People whose presence will feel less like the beginning of a new relationship and more like the recognition of something that was always supposed to exist between you. The kind of connection where you do not have to manage how much of yourself is visible, where the full version of who you are is not too much, where the depth you carry is met with an answering depth rather than a polite incomprehension. Those people are already on their way. Some of them are further along in their journey toward you than you might imagine. And the work have done in this season, the interior work of becoming someone who can hold that quality of connection without shrinking from it or self-sabotaging it, is exactly what makes you ready to receive them. The third thing that is shifting is your relationship with resources and opportunity. I want to say this carefully because I am not interested in offering you a prosperity formula or a transactional theology that reduces divine blessing to a reward system based on correct behavior. What I am saying is something more specific and more honest than that. There is a way of moving through the world that characterized the hardest years of this season, a posture of striving, of fighting for every inch of ground, of needing to push and prove and perform in order to secure what should have been available without all of that expenditure of energy. And that posture was not wrong given what the season required, but it was exhausting. And it was not the posture you were designed to carry permanently. What is shifting now is the underlying dynamic. The striving is giving way to receiving. The fighting for your due is giving way to your due arriving. Not passively, not without your participation, but with a quality of ease that is entirely different from anything the striving years could produce. Opportunities that are genuinely yours do not require you to exhaust yourself making a case for why you deserve them. They arrive with a recognition already built into them, a sense of rightness that requires discernment rather than performance to identify and accept. What you need to be careful about in this season is the temptation to keep operating from the posture of the previous one. The habit of striving can outlast the necessity for it. You may find yourself working harder than the situation requires, defending yourself in conversations that do not require defense, proving yourself to people whose opinion of you no longer carries the weight it once did, because the muscle memory of the difficult years is still active even after the difficult years have ended. Notice that. Name it when it happens. And give yourself the permission to put down the armor that served you in the battle that is now behind you. You do not need to fight for what is already coming toward you. You need only to be present enough, clear enough, and grounded enough to receive it when it arrives. Now, I want to say something to you about what not to do in this transitional moment. Because the threshold between a season of waiting and a season of fulfillment is one of the most vulnerable places a chosen one can stand. The temptation at this threshold is to rush, to try to accelerate the arrival of what is coming by forcing movement before the ground is fully ready, to mistake the lifting of the fog for the arrival of full daylight and start running before your eyes have adjusted to the new light. Do not rush, do not force, do not fill the new space with the old noise, simply because the silence of transition feels unfamiliar. The three shifts I have described in direction, in connection, and in resources are all moving toward you with a timing that is coordinated in ways you cannot fully see from where you are standing. Your role in this moment is not to make them happen faster. Your role is to remain open, to stay honest with yourself about what you are sensing and what you are being invited into, and to trust that what has already been set in motion does not require your anxiety to reach completion. You can believe this. That is not a command. It is a permission. You are allowed to believe that the ground is already shifting. You are allowed to carry that belief openly rather than privately. You are allowed to let other chosen ones see it in you, because your willingness to believe in this threshold is itself a sign to others who are still deciding whether to believe in theirs. Chosen ones do not simply receive what they have been given and then hold it quietly to themselves. They carry it forward. They multiply it. Every person who has found this message and felt something real shift in them is part of a movement that no single waiting season could contain. And what you do with what you are receiving right now is part of something larger than your individual story. If you feel that largeness right now, I want to invite you to press like on this message as an act of choosing to be part of what is being built here, not as a favor to this channel, but as a chosen one saying yes to the movement they belong to. Drop a word in the comments as a signal to every other chosen one watching that they are not in this alone, that the ground is shifting for others too, that this is not an isolated experience but a wave. Share this with someone who is still in the thick of their waiting season and needs to know that the three shifts are already moving toward them as well. Because the most powerful thing a chosen one who has crossed a threshold can do for another is reach back and say, I see the ground moving. Come forward. Stay at this table by subscribing, because what is being built in this community is something you were meant to be part of for longer than a single message. And if you feel led to sow into the ground that grows this for the next person, the pinned comment carries that opportunity as well. Type the word receive in the comments if you feel those three shifts already moving in your life, because naming what you are sensing is one of the ways you give it permission to fully arrive. What you have just named, or what you felt even if you did not yet type the word, is not a small thing. the recognition of movement, the willingness to say aloud, or even just internally that yes, something is shifting, that yes, the ground beneath me feels different than it did at the beginning of this message, is itself an act of courage for someone who has been disappointed enough times to become careful about hope. I want to honor that courage before we go any further, because what I am about to speak over your life requires that you receive it from a place of openness rather than guardedness. And openness, for someone who has walked the road you have walked, is one of the bravest postures available. So before I give you the name I want to give you today, I want to say this simply and directly. The fact that you are still open after everything that tried to close you is extraordinary. Do not take it for granted. Do not mistake it for naivety. Your openness is not the openness of someone who has never been hurt. It is the openness of someone who has been hurt and has chosen, with full knowledge of the cost, to remain reachable. That is not weakness dressed up as strength. That is strength in its most refined and most rare form. Now, I want to give you the name that belongs to this season of your life, the name for the person you have become through everything this journey has required of you. And I want to be clear that this is not a name I am assigning to you from the outside, based general idea of who chosen ones are supposed to be. This is a name that emerges from the specific texture of what you have lived through, the specific quality of what the fire of this season has produced in you, the specific gift that your particular path of suffering and survival and quiet perseverance has placed in your hands to carry forward. The name is Wound Breaker. I want to explain what that means, because it is a name that carries more weight than it might initially appear to. And I do not want you to receive it as simply a title or a label. I want you to understand the full architecture of what it contains. A wound breaker is someone who has carried, in their own body and their own history and their own long interior journey, a wound that did not originate with them. You did not invent the pain you have been carrying. Some of it was inherited, passed down through family lines so quietly and so consistently that it was simply part of the atmosphere you grew up in before you were old enough to question whether it was supposed to be there. Some of it was inflicted, placed on you by people or systems, or circumstances that had no right to mark you the way they did. Some of it was accumulated, layer upon layer of difficulty that settled into a weight that began to feel like identity, as though the suffering was not something happening to you, but something that was you. And the miracle, the specific and irreducible miracle of your story, is that you did not pass it on. You did not take what was handed to you and hand it forward to the next person in the line. You did not let it harden you into someone who wounds others the way you were wounded. You did not let it convince you that the cycle was simply how things worked, that pain moved forward in time, the way water moves downhill, naturally, and inevitably and without the possibility of interruption. You interrupted it. Not perfectly, not without struggle, not without moments where the old patterns surfaced and you had to make the choice again, consciously and deliberately, to respond differently than you had been taught. But you interrupted it, and that interruption, chosen again and again across the years of this season, is the act that defines the wound breaker. The wound breaker does not simply survive their history. They transform it. They take the raw material of what was broken in them, and they do not allow it to remain simply broken. They work with it through prayer and reflection and honest reckoning, and the kind of patient interior labor that no one else can see but that produces something no external achievement can replicate. The capacity to stand in the presence of someone else's pain and not flinch, not fix, not perform, but simply remain. Present in a way that says, I know this place and you are not alone in it. That is what this season has built in you. The ability to be present to suffering, your own and others, without being destroyed by it. The ability to hold space for the complexity of what it means to be human and chosen and hurting and hopeful all at the same time. The ability to speak into silence with authority, not because you have all the answers, but because you have walked far enough into the darkness to know that there is light on the other side, and that the path, however difficult, does lead somewhere. The wound breaker is also someone whose very presence begins to shift the atmosphere of the spaces they enter. Not because they try to, not because they have perfected some technique of influence or charisma, but because the frequency they carry, refined by fire and grounded in something that cannot not be manufactured by comfort or convenience, creates a kind of resonance that people can feel even when they cannot name it. You have probably experienced this without fully understanding it. The person who opens up to you in a conversation you did not expect to go deep. The stranger whose eyes find yours in a room full of people. The friend who says, I do not know why, but I feel like I can tell you things I have not told anyone else. That is the wound breaker in operation. That is the gift that the suffering produced. And here is what I want you to understand about carrying this name into the season ahead. The wound breaker is not called to carry the wounds of others as an addition to their own. The work of the wound breaker is not self-sacrifice in the sense of depletion, of giving until there is nothing left, of being consumed by the needs of those who recognize the light in you and want to be near it. The wound breaker is called to carry the healing, not the wounds themselves. There is a difference, and it is a difference you will need to hold clearly as you step into what is coming. Because the people who are moving towards you in this next season will sometimes, unconsciously, try to give you what they carry rather than receive what you have to offer. Your work is to hold the boundary between those two things with gentleness and with firmness. Because you cannot pour from a vessel that has been emptied by someone else's need. You are allowed to protect the well. You are allowed to say, this is the water I carry, and this is how much I can offer today, and to know that offering from a full place is always more powerful than offering from an empty one. The wound breaker, who has learned to receive, to rest, to be replenished by the same source that sent them, is the one whose impact reaches furthest and lasts longest. And so I want to close this part with blessings, not the formal kind, not the kind that sound like they were read from a script, the kind that I mean with every word. May the silence you have carried find its voice in exactly the right moment for exactly the right person. May the depth that was built in you through the hardest years be received by people who are ready for it and worthy of it. May the wounds that you have broken in your own line never find their way to the hands of those who come after you. May you wake tomorrow with the quiet certainty that what is coming has your name on it and always did. May the frequency you carry, the one that was dimmed by the long season and is now being restored, ring clear and true and loud enough for every person it was meant to reach. May you receive, in this next season, rest that actually restores, connection that actually nourishes, and purpose that actually fits the full shape of who you have become. And may you know, in the place where knowing matters most, that the road behind you was not a waste. It was the making of a wound breaker, and the world has been waiting for exactly you. The blessings I just spoke over you were not ceremonial. They were not the kind of words that dissolve the moment the sound of them fades. They were spoken into something that is already in motion, and what I want to do now is bring that motion into the most practical territory we have visited together in this entire message. because you have done the interior work. You have sat with the grief. You have received the name. You have felt the shifts beginning. And now the question that rises, naturally and honestly from all of that, is this: what do I actually do? Not in the abstract, not in the spiritual language of positioning and frequency and divine timing, though all of that remains true and remains the foundation of everything I am about to say. But practically, concretely, with your feet on the ground and your actual life in front of you, and the actual people and circumstances and decisions that are waiting for your attention when this message ends. What do you do now? I want to walk you through 3 specific areas where transformation is already underway. And in each one, I want to give you something actionable, something you can carry out of this conversation and into the hours and days immediately ahead. Because the wound breaker does not only receive revelation, the wound breaker moves. The first area is relationships. Here is what is happening in your relational landscape right now, whether you have fully noticed it yet or not. There are people in your life who are leaving. Some of them are leaving loudly, with conflict and misunderstanding, and the kind of painful friction that makes the ending impossible to ignore. Others are leaving quietly, with a slow drift that you may have been trying to reverse through more effort, or more accommodation, or more willingness to make yourself smaller than you actually are, in order to maintain a connection that has already served its full purpose. Both kinds of departure are real, and both carry a cost that I do not want to minimize. But I want to offer you a reframe that may change how you hold both of them. The people who are leaving are not evidence that you are losing something. They are evidence that the container of your life is being reconfigured to hold something different. When a room is being renovated, the old furniture has to be moved out before the new can come in. The moving out is not the loss, it is the preparation. And the grief you feel as certain connections loosen or end is not a sign that you made a mistake in how you loved those people or how you showed up in those relationships. It is the honest emotional response to real change, and it is allowed to be felt fully without being interpreted as failure. What is also happening simultaneously and sometimes invisibly is that new people are being drawn into your orbit. People who carry the frequency of the season you are entering rather than the season you are leaving. And here is the practical word I want to give you about those incoming connections. Do not test them with the filters of the old season. Do not make them prove themselves against the standard of disappointments they had no part in creating. Do not withhold the full version of yourself from them as a protective measure, because the connections that belong to this next season are specifically designed to hold what the old ones could not. And the only way to discover that is to allow yourself, gradually and wisely, but genuinely, to be known. The practical action for this area is simple. Identify one relationship in your life right now that has been asking for more of your presence than you have been able to give, because the guardedness of the previous season had the gate closed. Not a relationship that has already run its course, but one that is reaching toward you and meeting a wall that the previous season built. This week, lower the gate by 1 degree, not entirely, not recklessly, but intentionally and consciously offer that person one honest thing about where you actually are. Watch what they do with it. The response will tell you everything you need to know about whether this connection belongs to the season ahead. The second area is purpose. The question of what you are supposed to be doing has been one of the most persistent and most exhausting questions of the difficult years. It has circled back again and again, sometimes as genuine inquiry, and sometimes as a weapon you used against yourself in the moments when the gap between calling and circumstance felt widest. And I want to tell you something about that question that the season ahead is going to make increasingly clear. The question is not going to be answered all at once. It is going to be answered in steps, and the first step is almost always smaller and more immediate than the mind that has been waiting for the grand revelation expects. What is happening in the area of purpose right now is this. The question that has felt impossibly large is narrowing. It is becoming specific. The answer is not arriving as a comprehensive life plan with all the details resolved and all the contingencies accounted for. It is arriving as one clear small step that presents itself with a quality of quiet rightness that is different from the grasping urgency that characterized the striving of the previous season. That step is probably already visible to you or will become visible very soon. And the reason you may have been hesitating to take it is that it seems too small to be significant, too ordinary to be the answer to a question that has felt so large for so long. Take the step anyway. The wound breaker does not wait for the full staircase to be visible before taking the first one. The staircase reveals itself one step at a time, and the revelation of each new step is contingent on the taking of the one before it. The small, clear action that is available to you right now is not beneath the calling you were made for. It is the beginning of it, dressed in ordinary clothes, because that is how beginnings almost always arrive. The practical action for this area is equally direct. Before you sleep tonight, write down, even in a single sentence, the one step that has been presenting itself quietly at the edge of your awareness, the one you have been rationalizing away as too small or too uncertain or not the right time. Write it down not as a commitment to a perfect plan, but as an acknowledgement that you see it and you are willing to take it. That act of acknowledgement is itself the first movement of the step. The rest follows. The third area is resources and opportunity. What is shifting here is both practical and deeply interior, and the two dimensions are more connected than they might initially appear. At the practical level, there are opportunities that are already in motion toward you that you have not yet been able to see because the posture of striving that the previous season required has been keeping your gaze pointed at the ground immediately in front of you rather than at the wider landscape where the approach is visible. The striving posture looks like this: constant monitoring of what is not yet here, constant calculation of what needs to happen in order to secure what is needed, constant negotiation with circumstances, trying to force outcomes that are not yet ready to arrive. That posture kept you alive in the difficult season. It was the right tool for what the season required, but it is expensive, and it is no longer the posture the new season is asking of you. What the new season is asking instead is what I would describe as grounded receptivity. The ability to remain fully engaged, fully present, fully active in the practical responsibilities of your life, while simultaneously holding an interior openness to what is arriving, rather than only what is being manufactured by your effort. Grounded receptivity is not passivity. It is not sitting still and waiting for things to fall from the sky. It is working with your full capacity while releasing the white-knuckled grip on the outcome. Because the outcome that belongs to this season is already determined, and your anxiety about whether it will arrive is not a contributing factor to its arrival. What is also happening practically is that the right people, the ones with the access and the authority and the capacity to open the doors that your effort alone could not open, are beginning to notice you. Not because you have finally performed well enough to deserve their attention, but because the season of preparation has made you visible in a different way. There is a quality to someone who has been through the fire and come out refined rather than destroyed. That draws the attention of people who know what refined looks like. You carry that quality now. Let it be seen. The practical action for this area requires the most courage of the three. Identify one opportunity that you have been treating as out of reach. One door you have not allowed yourself to approach because the previous season conditioned you to expect it to be closed before you even arrived at the threshold. This week, approach it. Not with the desperation of someone who needs it to say yes in order to survive. With the quiet confidence of a wound breaker who knows that what belongs to them does not require them to beg for it. Simply make the reach. Write the message, make the call, submit the application, show up for the conversation, and then release the outcome to the timing that is already operating on your behalf. These three areas, relationships, purpose, and resources, are not separate tracks running parallel to each other. They are a single transformation expressing itself in 3 dimensions simultaneously. What shifts in one will be felt in the others, and the movement you initiate in any one of them, however small, sends a signal into all 3 that the wound breaker has stepped out of the waiting room and into the season that was always waiting to begin. You showed up. That is the thing I want to say to you first, before anything else, because it matters more than you may currently be giving it credit for. You showed up for this entire message, which means you showed up for yourself and for someone who has been in a long season of carrying more than their share while receiving less than their due. That act of showing up, of choosing to be present to something that asked you to go deep and stay there, is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the posture that everything in the parts ahead will be built upon. I want to thank you. Not in the performative way that words of gratitude can sometimes be offered as a pleasantry at the close of a transaction. I mean it in the way that one person means it to another when something real has been shared between them and the sharing has cost something on both sides. You brought your history into this space. You brought the grief and the questions and the quiet, desperate hope that maybe this time the words would land somewhere that actually made a difference. And I want you to know that I have not taken that lightly. Not for a single moment of this message. Right now, all across this world, other chosen ones are inside this exact same message. Some of them are sitting in the early morning before anyone else in their household is awake. Some of them are listening in the dark of a late night, in the particular silence that arrives when the demands of the day have finally gone quiet enough for the soul to be heard. Some of them are in the middle of circumstances that are so heavy they could not have named before today what they were hoping to find when they pressed play. And every single one of them, like you, carried something real into this space and found, I hope, that something real was waiting here to meet them. You are not alone in what you have been carrying. You were never alone, even in the moments when the aloneness felt like the most factual thing about your situation. The community of chosen ones is not a metaphor. It is a living reality distributed across geographies and circumstances and life stages and languages, all moving through variations of the same fundamental journey, all arriving in their own time and in their own way, at the same recognition that you have been arriving at today. And now I want to give you one final practice before we close. Not a technique, not a discipline that requires maintenance or monitoring. A single act that you can perform right now, in this moment, before you move into whatever comes next in your day. I want you to imagine, as vividly as you are able, everything you have been carrying into this message as a physical weight. Give it a shape if you can. Give it a texture. Give it the actual heaviness that it has had in your body, in your shoulders, in your chest, in the space behind your eyes, where the tiredness lives. Let yourself feel the full weight of it for just a moment, not to be crushed by it again, but to acknowledge that you have been carrying it, that the carrying has been real, and that it has cost you something genuinely significant. And now I want you to imagine standing at a threshold, a doorway between the room you have been in and the room you are entering. And I want you to set the weight down, not throw it, not reject it, or pretend it was never real. Simply set it down at the threshold on the side of the room you are leaving. Because what is in the room ahead does not require you to bring it in. The wound breaker does not carry the wounds into the new season. They leave them at the door, honored and acknowledged and released, and they walk forward with the wisdom the wounds produced, but without the weight of the wounds themselves. Take a breath and step through. What you have just done is not symbolic in the dismissive sense that word sometimes carries. It is a real interior movement that your body and your mind and your spirit will register as a marker. A before and the after is where you are now. Something real was built in this space today, in the territory between this voice and your listening heart, and it belongs to both of us now. If you feel that something meant something to you, pressing like is simply a way of saying so without needing to find the words, and there is no obligation attached to it. Only the quiet acknowledgement of what was shared here. If you want to leave something in the comments, even a single word, know that every chosen one who arrives at this message after, you will feel less alone because you were here before them and you marked the space with your presence. And if there is one person in your life who is still standing at the threshold you just crossed, still holding the weight you just set down, sharing this with them is perhaps the most direct act of love available to you in this moment. If you have not yet chosen to remain part of this community, I want to gently extend that invitation now, not as a platform action, but as the choosing to stay at a table where something real is being offered, where the next message is already being prepared for the next layer of what you are walking into, and where your presence is not incidental, but genuinely part of what this community is becoming. And if something in this message has moved through you in a way that made you want to pass it forward, there is a way to do that in the pinned comment below. No pressure, no expectation, only the open door for the chosen one who feels that passing something forward is the right response to having received something. Before I close, I want to mention one more time, gently and without force, the genius wave. Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years building a tool for exactly the kind of person you are. Someone whose neurological frequency was dimmed by the weight of a long and difficult season, and who deserves the support of something precise and practical in restoring what was always theirs. If the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, and you know it is a yes, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. 7 minutes. That is all it asks. And what it begins to restore is the clarity, the receptivity, the gamma frequency of the wound breaker operating at full signal, which is exactly what the season ahead is going to require of you. You came here carrying something heavy. You are leaving carrying something different. Not lighter in the sense of having avoided the weight, but lighter in the sense of having set it down at the threshold where it belongs, and freer now to carry forward only what was always yours to carry: the wisdom, the depth, the compassion, the calling, and the quiet, unshakable knowing of a chosen one who has come through the fire and is walking, at last, into the morning that the fire was always preparing them for. There is one more thing I want to say to you before you go. Not information, not instruction, not another layer of content to process or integrate or act upon. Just this, a blessing, spoken quietly, at the end of everything we have walked through together today, meant to go with you into wherever you are headed next. You came into this message as someone who had survived something long and something hard. You are leaving it as someone who has been named. And the distance between those two things, between surviving and being named, is not a small distance. It is, in fact, the distance that this entire season was asking you to travel, and you have traveled it. And I want you to carry that with you, not as a concept, but as a settled interior fact. The wound breaker walks differently than the person who entered the waiting season. Not with arrogance, not with the brittle confidence of someone who has not yet been tested. With the quiet, grounded certainty of someone who has been tested and still open, still reaching, still willing to believe that what was promised is coming and that what is coming is worth everything the road required. I want to bless your next conversation, the one that happens today or tomorrow or sometime in the days immediately ahead, where someone is going to need exactly the quality of presence that this season has built in you. May you have the words when the words are needed, and the silence when the silence is more powerful than any word. May you recognize the moment when it arrives and meet it without hesitation. I want to bless your sleep tonight. The particular rest that comes not from the absence of difficulty, but from the presence of peace, the kind of peace that does not depend on all the circumstances being resolved, but that holds steady beneath them, like bedrock, holds steady beneath everything built upon it. May you sleep tonight as someone who has set something down at a threshold and does not need to go back and pick it up again. I want to bless the relationships that are coming, the ones whose faces you have not yet seen and whose names you do not yet know, who are moving toward you right now with something that matches what you carry, in a way that nothing in the previous season quite managed to. May you be open enough to receive them and wise enough to recognize them and brave enough to let them know you fully. I want to bless the small, clear step that is waiting for you in the area of purpose, the one that seems too ordinary to be the beginning of something significant. May you take it with the confidence of someone who knows that every great thing that has ever been built began with one step that looked exactly like that, small and specific and slightly terrifying and absolutely right. I want to bless your frequency, the gamma signal that was dimmed by the long season and is now being restored. May it ring clear and steady and strong enough to reach every person it was calibrated to reach. And may you feel the difference in your clarity and your creativity and your capacity to receive what has always been prepared for you. And finally, most simply, I want to bless you, not the version of you that performed well enough to deserve blessing, not the version of you that had everything together and never doubted and never wavered and never sat in the dark wondering whether any of this was real. The actual you, the one who showed up here today with the full weight of everything this season has cost and chose, one more time, to remain open to the possibility that something was about to change. That person is worthy of every good thing that is coming. That person earned nothing in the transactional sense, because grace does not operate on the economy of earning. But that person is precisely and exactly and irreducibly the one for whom this message was always intended. Go gently. Go with your eyes open. Go knowing that you are not going alone, that the community of chosen ones is walking with you, even when you cannot see them, that heaven has not looked away from your story for a single moment of this season and is not looking away now. You are the wound breaker, and the world has been waiting for you to know it. Go now and carry the light.